Commission meeting for Tuesday, July 21st, 2020. Before we call the roll, I have a message regarding tonight's meeting. We appreciate everyone who's participating in the teleconference meeting, and as for the last several months, the meeting is being conducted pursuant to the Governor's Executive Order N-29-20. Because it's a technological meeting with remote tools, and we want to make sure that everyone who wants to participate has an opportunity. There may be moments of dead air while we're making sure that those who wish to call attention so they can be called upon and participate actually have the chance to do so using technology that they may not be familiar with on a day-to-day basis. There are instructions to call into the meeting and to participate from a computer, and those instructions are on the agenda if you have it, or on the city's website, which is cityofvacaville.com. Planning Commission meetings can also be seen live on the website or on cable channel 26. If you plan to participate tonight, you need to follow along on the telephone, especially not on channel 26. There's a broadcast delay, and by the time that we're showing on 26 is talking about something, we may already be past the item. So if you want to participate, make sure you're doing so by computer or by phone. Callers who wish to comment can raise their hand by pressing *9 on their phone. Computer users can click the raise hand button within their Zoom controls in order to raise their hand and draw attention that they wish to speak. Depending upon the individual settings you have, you may need to press *6 after you have been unmuted by the host in order to open your microphone and participate. With that being taken care of, I will ask the secretary to call the roll for tonight's meeting.
Good evening, Planning Commissioners. Chair McCauley.
Here.
Vice Chair Fortney. Vice Chair Fortney. Commissioners Aldridge.
Here.
Beaumont.
Here.
Alan Johnson.
Here.
Brett Johnson. Commissioner Brett Johnson. Commissioner Lightfoot.
Here.
Chair, we have a quorum.
Thank you. In looking at the screen, I do see Vice Chair Fortney and Commissioner Brent Johnson's names show up on the screen. Would you call their names one more time, please?
Commissioner Fortney, excuse me, Vice Chair Fortney.
Okay.
Commissioner Brett Johnson.
For both of them on the screen, I see a blue hand, which to me indicates that they are attempting to communicate. So at some point, they may be able to get through, and then we'll confirm that. In the meantime, item number 2 is the Pledge of Allegiance. So wherever you are, please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Mr. Baderi, do we have any communications?
There we go. Sorry. Yes, Chair McCauley, we have an item, and that is a full copy of the Planning Commission's rules and procedures. We inadvertently left a couple of pages of those out of your packet. And so this afternoon we sent to you a full copy so you would have that available to you.
Thank you. Any additional correspondence?
No others.
Okay. Next is item number 4, the approval of the agenda as is proposed. Do I have any recommendations for changes to the agenda? Seeing none, since we do all our actions by a roll call vote, I'll simply ask the secretary to call the roll on approval of the agenda.
Commissioner Aldridge.
Yes.
Beaumont.
Yes.
Alan Johnson.
Aye.
Brett Johnson. I know he can raise his hand. Commissioner Lightfoot,
Aye.
Vice Chair Fortney, Chair McCauley.
Aye. And I do note again that we have the Vice Chair and we have Commissioner Brett Johnson are showing on the screen, but we're not hearing any audio from them. The next item is business from the floor. This is a time to address the commission on issues that are not on tonight's agenda, but that are within the commission's subject matter jurisdiction. We limit 3 minutes per speaker or group of speakers per the government code and the Vacaville Municipal Code. Is there anyone who is participating tonight that wishes to participate in business from the floor? I see nothing showing up. Madam Secretary, are there any names that are showing up for you, for someone who wishes to participate in business from the floor?
I am showing none.
Okay. Seeing no one from business from the floor, we'll close that and go on to the consent calendar. Consent calendar is one or more items that can be approved as a single motion. The only item on the consent calendar tonight is the approval of the minutes from the June 16, 2020 meeting. I will ask, are there any corrections to the minutes of the June meeting? I see Commissioner Johnson's hand is up. I don't know if he is seeking to make any amendments. Is there anyone else who has amendments to the minutes? Commission members, I'm going to take about 1 minute to see if staff can work out so that Vice Chair Fortney and Commissioner Brent Johnson can speak. So sorry if there's a little bit of dead air, but we're going to try and work this out before we take action and then go ahead.
Testing, Brett Johnson.
Commissioner Brett Johnson, I could hear you. There's been a little bit of an echo afterwards, but I could hear you. And we're going to contact Vice Chair Fortney to see if he can participate. Commissioner Johnson, your hand had been up earlier. Did you have any correction to the minutes?
I did not, thank you.
Okay. And for this one, I will actually ask for a motion on approval of the consent calendar. Commissioner Aldrich?
I move approval.
Do I have a second to Commissioner Aldrich's motion for approval?
Second.
Okay. If you could state your name, if you do a second, just to make sure I know who's speaking.
Alan Johnson.
Thank you, Commissioner Johnson. We have a motion by Commissioner Aldrich, second by Commissioner Alan Johnson to approve the consent calendar. Secretary, please call the roll.
Commissioners Aldrich,
Yes.
Beaumont,
Yes.
Alan Johnson,
Aye.
Brett Johnson,
Yes.
Lightfoot,
Aye.
Vice Chair Fortney, I've got a message. He says yes. Chair McCauley.
Aye. So the motion passes 7-0. Our next item is number 7, which is a public hearing on the Aviator and East Monte Vista Warehouse. Those applicants, file number 20-017, and a series of presentation will be made by Mr. Arubi. So staff, go ahead and make your presentation. For those who are members of the public who have not participated in something like this before, staff makes an initial presentation. The commissioners may ask questions of staff at that time. We'll then open the public hearing, give the applicant or the applicant's representative a chance to make a first comment, then give members of the public any chance to comment, ask questions, speak for or against. At the end, when all those public comments are done, we'll close the meeting. The commission will then go ahead and discuss what we've heard and take an action. That way everybody knows what the process is. At this point, I will go ahead and ask staff to initiate their presentation.
Before we proceed, this is Assistant City Attorney Andrea Borba. Ms. Vice Chair Fortney, if you are calling in on a phone line, if you could give us the last 3 digits of your number. All right, maybe not. Proceed.
So while we're waiting for that to happen, Albert, go ahead with your presentation.
Thank you, Chair and members of the... Thanks, Chair.
Yeah, proceed.
Thanks, members of the Planning Commission. Please let me know if there's any problems. If you can hear me okay, I'll proceed with the presentation, but feel free to stop me or ask any questions if you guys have trouble hearing the presentation. So the item in front of you tonight, it's the Aviator and East Monte Vista Warehouse project. If we could proceed to the next slide, please. The request is for a general plan amendment, an environmental assessment, and a design review request to change the general plan designation from general commercial to industrial park for 2 properties located at the northwest corner of Aviator Drive and East Monte Vista Avenue. The proposal also includes a design review request to construct 2 new warehouse buildings and associated improvements. And as part of the project, staff circulated and processed a mitigated negative declaration for this proposal. If we can proceed to the next slide. So this slide shows the project site and general vicinity of the area. The project site is south of Vacaville Parkway on the 505 interchange, south of Vacaville. Project site is accessed via East Monte Vista, Cessna, and Aviator Drive. If we can proceed. In summary, the project site includes about 30 acres. The site is zoned industrial park and it's within the Vacaville Golden Hills policy plan. As I've mentioned, the project includes 2 new warehouse buildings. Building 1 includes approximately 305,000 square feet of building, and it will be located within an 18.5 acre site. Building 2, it's approximately 204,000 square feet, and the project site, it's about 11.5 acres. The proposed buildings consist of speculative warehouse buildings. No uses are being proposed at the time. They consist of concrete tilt-up structures. And for the time being, the applicant is providing 398 total parking spaces to comply with the policy plan and with the municipal code. This request also includes a request to add additional FAR for building 1. The applicant is requesting 1% of additional FAR. This particular request can be granted because the project site is located in an area where the roadway network has adequate capacity for the proposed use. Also, the water and sewer system also has adequate capacity for the proposed use. And also the buildings that they're proposing are compatible to the adjoining uses. In addition, the applicant wishes to obtain an exception to the height of building 2. The policy plan requires buildings within 250 feet from East Monte Vista to be 36 feet in height. The applicant is requesting to obtain additional 3 feet. The policy plan allows for this exception if the applicant can demonstrate that the proposed standard, it's equal or superior to the policy plan. In this particular case, staff believes that the additional 3 feet, which will be used for a building parapet to screen all of the rooftop equipment, would be equal or superior to the standard. If we could please proceed to the next slide.
Mr. Ruby, just before we go, I have a question for you. This is Chair McCauley. In looking at the mitigated negative declaration initial study, on page 67, it talks about a maximum building height of 49 feet 6 inches, but the staff report in your presentation just said a maximum building height of 39 feet. So I assume that the environmental document anticipated something higher, but the actual application that's ahead of us right now is the 39 feet and not what's talked about for 49 feet in the initial study. Is that correct?
The policy plan for has 2 different height standards. One of the height standards is 70 feet. The other height standard is 36 feet for those buildings that are located within 200 feet of East Monte Vista. So this particular request applies only to building number 2. So building number 2 is located within 250 feet of East Monte Vista, and therefore there's a limit. But this particular request only applies for building 2. We could go back and review the draft MND and make sure that the heights are being described appropriately.
But now, okay, I understand now. The exception only applies to one of the buildings. Thanks. That answers my question.
Thank you.
While we have a stop, do any other commissioners have questions, or should we proceed? I see no other hands showing up right now, so go ahead.
This exhibit shows the proposed site plan for the project. The site plan would be divided into 2 different sites. Building 1 will be located within its own site with its own access. Building 2 would also be located within its own site and different access. One of the things that I want to point out about this exhibit is that one of the conditions of approval requires that a joint access agreement is processed between this project site on building 2 and the project site north of this site, which is the Vacaville hotel site, which hasn't been developed, but it's planned for future development. So both of those sites will have shared access. And if we can proceed to the next slide, please. As I've mentioned, the project includes a general plan amendment. This is for changing the land use designation of the 2 parcels located northwest of East Monte Vista and Aviator Drive. Before the adoption of the general plan in 2015, the site was designated industrial park. Also, the policy plan includes land uses that are consistent with the existing zoning, which is industrial park. So the request is to move back and change those 2 parcels to the industrial park designation, which would be consistent with the existing zoning and with the existing policy plan. If we can move forward to the next slide, please. This particular exhibit shows the existing land use designation in the general plan and the proposed designation, which for this site, it would be consistent to the land use before the approval of the general plan in 2015. We can proceed. The design review for this project includes the development of the 2 buildings. The buildings are appropriate and consistent to the adjoining development. Building 1, as I've mentioned, consists of approximately 305,000 square feet. Approximately 10,000 square feet of office space is being shown for this particular building. If additional office space is requested via building permits or tenant improvements for these buildings, This site does have additional area where potential additional parking could be added to accommodate future office buildings, because office uses require a little bit more parking than the typical warehouse industrial type use. Same applies for the building number 2, which is 204,000 square feet and approximately 30,000 square feet of office space. Again, at this time, this is a speculative concept. The planning department will continue to review these land uses as this comes through the building permit process and as future tenant improvements come to get permits. Both buildings consist of concrete tilt-top walls, which is pretty consistent with the other warehouse buildings in the policy plan area. Decorative, seamless metal, glass windows, and metal awnings are being proposed, which is adequate for the type of building that it's being proposed. So I've mentioned 398 parking spaces are being provided, and 112 truck spaces are being provided for both of these facilities. And access will be provided via East Monte Vista Avenue, Aviator Drive, and Cessna Drive. If we could proceed, please. This exhibit shows the elevations for Building 1. One of the things that I want to bring up with this particular elevations is that some of the loading dock areas of Building 1 will be facing Aviator Drive. Because loading dock areas are not aesthetically pleasing, we are requiring additional landscaping along Aviator, and we're also requiring additional glass elements in the center of the building to break up the elevation. If we could proceed to Building 2, please. Building 2 is a good example of what we're requesting for building number 1. This particular building doesn't have loading dock areas facing East Monte Vista. All the loading dock areas are on the backside of the building. And as I described before, buildings consist of concrete tilt-top walls. And if we can proceed. This exhibit shows the landscape plan. Landscaping is being provided to provide the required perimeter screening required by the policy plan. Also, the trees that are being proposed for this facilities will be providing 50% shading in 10 years, which is another requirement of the policy plan. And one of the other big items with the landscaping plan is the detention basin that is being proposed on the site for building number 1, which is being adequately screened by the proposed landscaping. If we can proceed, please. As part of the review of the project, city staff conducted an environmental assessment, which consisted of a mitigated negative declaration. The city circulated the environmental assessment for the 30-day public review period, started May 11th and finished on June 11th of this year. The study found that there were less than significant impacts with mitigation measures on items like cultural resources, tribal cultural resources, biological and hazardous and safety and hazardous. So to conclude the environmental assessment, we've also reached out to the Office of Planning and Research to determine whether or not a VMT analysis was required for this project, and to confirm, because the mitigated negative declaration was processed before July 1st of this year, we can process this M&D without a VMT analysis. So if we can proceed to the next slide. To conclude the presentation, staff is supportive of the project as proposed and conditioned, because the project would comply with policies and goals of the general plan. It would also comply with the existing zoning ordinance and with the existing Vacaville Golden Hills policy plan. The project as proposed is compatible with adjoining uses, and it will provide well-designed buildings, a well-designed site plan, and a well-designed landscape plan. In addition, this proposed project will continue to provide employment opportunities for the residents of Vacaville, and this project complies with the city's development standards. Can we please proceed to the next slide? To conclude the presentation, the staff is recommending that the Planning Commission recommend to the City Council to adopt the mitigated negative declaration, to approve the general plan amendment, changing the general plan designation for two parcels located at the northwest corner of Aviator Drive and East Monte Vista Avenue from general commercial to industrial park, and to approve the Aviator and East Monte Vista warehouse design review subject to the conditions of approval. That concludes my presentation. If you have any questions, please let me know.
Thank you. Well, I see Commissioner Alan Johnson and Brent Johnson both their hand up. I also see Vice Chair Fortney is shown now as attending by phone. Mr. Fortney, I want to confirm you're actually able to participate and you've been listening in the entire time.
I have heard you the entire time. Can you finally hear me?
We can hear you, and now the Secretary can go ahead and mark you as in attendance. So I see Commissioner Alan Johnson had his hand up first. Commissioner Johnson, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Saul, thank you for the presentation. I had a couple comments and a question. First of all, I noticed and appreciate the extra noticing efforts that the city went through on this one. I know it's a big project and there's a potential for, people to want to be notified and involved. So I appreciate that. Overall, it seems to be a good project, something that's good for our economic development as well as job prospects in the city of Vacaville. So as of now, I'm in favor of the project. But I had one question. We're asking to change the general plan designation from general commercial back to industrial park, something that it was prior to 2015. And even though I lived here, I wasn't heavily involved in 2015. So I had a question if you know, or if maybe somebody that's been here longer could answer the question, is why or what was the reasoning that it was changed in the first place in 2015? If you know.
Saul, I may be able to shed some background on that topic. This is Fred Buderi, Acting Director of Community Development. So during the conduct of the general plan, our outreach to community members around the city, we had an inquiry from owners of the properties that you see on the diagram. They were interested in making that change because they thought this might be suitable for some commercial development. The Planning Commission considered that among some other alternative land uses for this site and did recommend approval with the general commercial designation, and that's how the general plan was adopted by the City Council. However, after that, the owners did not pursue changing the zoning and pursuing commercial development, except for the corner that Saul mentioned in his presentation with the hotel project. So now that I guess I'd say the development climate has changed, there is interest in additional industrial type buildings. This is a site where we never had actually changed the zoning and the development standards to those commercial ones. And so that's kind of the background on that. Does that help?
It does. I just wanted to make sure that we weren't stepping on anybody's toes, or maybe that citizens had raised an issue, but that doesn't seem to be the case. So thank you. That does satisfy my question.
Commissioner Brent Johnson.
Thank you. I just had a quick question regarding the conditions of approval, condition number 11. give you guys a quick second to turn to that and take a look. It indicates the trash enclosure and pump house shall be constructed using CMU or concrete tilt-up. In reviewing the plans that were provided, I didn't see a pump house. Is a pump house required? And if so, for what on this particular project?
Thanks. That's a good question. Yeah, pump houses are required for this type of development, and I think actually the both sides will have a pump house. From talking to one of the staff members in the fire department, I believe those are required to provide the flow that is required for things like the fire sprinkler system that needs to be provided for these buildings. So that's the little that I can speak to that. I don't know if the applicant or a member of the engineering team is present that could explain that a little bit more.
And a follow-up to that, is that an interim requirement until the installation of that water loop is completed? I'm not sure the name of that project, but it's a city-initiated project of completing the water loop out there to serve all of that property that was underserved previously. Is that a requirement in the interim? And then once that loop is completed, ostensibly the pressure will be enough to not require pump stations on future projects?
Until the loop is completed, I'm not too familiar with that project. What I can say is that our engineering team and our fire department looked carefully at the proposal, and they did require both of those pump houses. I don't know if in the interim we'll require those, but we can get back to you. We can definitely look back at that item and answer that question.
And I can, again, this is Fred Buderi. This site is separate from the area that will be served by the new water line loop that you mentioned, Commissioner Johnson. So the pump house would not be related to that topic.
Okay, thank you, Fred.
Vice Chair Fortney.
Yes, thank you very much. Saul, I wanted to talk about jobs and the amount of jobs that this project could create. But I thought I heard you say at the beginning of your presentation that we do not have a designated use or user at this point, correct?
Yeah, that is correct. At the time, I don't know what the type of use will be on these buildings, but they're pretty big sized buildings. So I don't know if there's Go ahead.
Would you or Fred have the numbers of what we typically can see on a 500,000 square foot, these two buildings? We don't have proposed numbers from the applicant on how many jobs it would create, but what are we looking at potentially?
Well, maybe, Commissioner, this is Payman. Maybe I can step in briefly.
Yeah.
So a lot of these, as you know, a lot of the warehouse projects are done on spec, and they're done in anticipation of certain sectors needing warehouse space. As you're aware, the city has Amazon off of Crocker, and I believe they're looking at another building in the city too. And those were both projects that were spec. So they're being designed primarily as warehouse spaces, but I think they could also be available to accommodate the city's new biotech strategy as well. So the warehouse buildings that can be modified to host a number of uses that some would be like Amazon. I don't know that they have a lot of employees, but other ones could be fitted to have more intense development inside. But perhaps the applicant could speak to sort of who they're targeting that the city staff is not aware of.
Eamon, do you know if we have the applicant or a representative here tonight? We do. Okay, then that's certainly something that when we go for public input, we'll make a point of asking. Vice Chair, do you have other questions?
No, with the roadway being adequate and the project impact being less than significant, I'm good. Thank you very much.
Commissioner Beaumont.
Yeah, thank you, Saul, for the presentation. I just wondered, I noticed a detention basin on the southeast corner of Building 2. Just wondered how the flow of the drainage is going to be handled off of that plot.
So that particular detention basin is going to capture water from Building 1. And then it will enter the city's storm drain system on the southern eastern corner of the project site. I believe the applicant might be here, that they could add additional comments to that.
Okay, thank you. And I have one other question. It's kind of a stupid question, but I think there's a roundabout going to be built up on Monte Vista and Vacaville Parkway. And I just wondered how big rigs will go about a roundabout. There are going to be a lot of big rigs going around that. Does that work very well?
I'm sure the roundabout is going to be designed to accommodate all those larger vehicles. There's already a lot of uses in the industrial areas that have a lot of heavy traffic. And I'm sure that the roundabout that it's being proposed at that intersection would be adequate to serve these buildings as well.
Thank you.
Commissioner Lightfoot.
Hello, thank you for the presentation. My question is regarding the exterior elevation of Building A or Building 1.
Okay.
In the presentation, you said that you were requesting additional features to be added to the elevation that's facing Aviator Drive. And is it my understanding that the current renderings don't show the requested change and that these will be changing?
Yeah, the elevations that you see on the presentation will be changing. The conditions of approval include additional requirements that at the time of building permit, staff will make sure that the proposed building design complies with those conditions. And as I've mentioned, what we are requesting is 5 feet of additional landscaping along Aviator, and then additional glass elements in the center of the building to break up the elevation. If we can go to Building 2, it will be pretty similar to Building 2, to the elevation that faces East Monte Vista from Building 2.
And it would, in between, so if you look to the areas to the right and to the left of that center section where the mouse is on now, those would still be truck bays, correct?
Yeah. The loading docks would be still there. The condition is just requiring additional architectural elements to the center of the building to break up the elevation. If you see the elevation that faces Aviator has a lot of concrete tilt-top walls. What we're looking for is to add additional elements to the center to break it up a little bit.
Perfect, thank you.
That would not reduce the number of loading bays, correct?
No, it will not reduce the number of loading docks. The elements could potentially be added above those loading docks.
Thank you very much.
Did that address your concern?
Yes, it did. Thank you.
Do you have any other questions? Seeing no other commissioners' hands raised at the moment, I'm going to go ahead, since this is a public hearing, and I'm going to open the public hearing. I see someone with a telephone whose last 3 numbers are 828. Go ahead and make your comment or ask your questions.
Hi, this is Chelsea Bowman. I am with Buzz Oates here representing the applicant tonight. And I apologize with the virtual environment. It's hard. You guys can't see me raising my hand and wanting to chime in on some of the questions that came up earlier. But I will go back just to clarify that, yes, a pump house is required for the warehouses that we build in order to provide the fire flows necessary for the ESFR fire sprinkler system, and that stands for Early Suppression Fast Response. It's very important for the users that we attract into our buildings. So having that additional fire flow is critical for us. It is outside of the water loop line, as Fred clarified, that's up on Eubanks and Midway. As far as the elevation comment, yes, we would be looking at adding some glass architectural elements above the dock doors so as to not reduce the number of dock positions in the building. And are there any other questions that I missed?
I don't recall any other commissioners had questions. I'll go back to the panelist list and see if any commissioners have their hands raised for questions for the applicant.
Oh, no, my question was in regards to the user and jobs for the applicant.
Yes, so, but sure. So Buzz Oats typically builds buildings on spec. So at this point, we do not have a user nailed down. We are in preliminary discussions and moving along towards that with a few, but at this time, I don't have any job numbers that I can provide concretely. But as Payman mentioned, we do tend to attract tenants such as Amazon and other warehouse distribution uses. But we are certainly open to, if there is a biotech type user who's looking for a facility like this, we certainly would be open to talking with them.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
Do I have any other commissioners with questions for the applicant at this point? Seeing none, if we can go over to the attendee list and see if any other members of the public have raised their hand. And I see there is someone with a phone number, the last three digits are 488. You have the floor. You may go ahead and proceed.
Thank you, Commissioner. This is Teresa Stout. I just have a quick question for the applicant. I heard her just, the woman representing the applicant, I heard her just say that the kind of businesses that they attract would require the need for a pump house. And those type of businesses could be like Amazon and such. Does Amazon out there, actually this may not be for the applicant, it may be for the staff. Does Amazon have to have a pump house? Do they have one on site for them? Or is there another type of business that the applicant is trying to bring on board that their usual course of business is to have a pump house? Because that's probably a quite large expense. Thank you.
But Ariel, I'll ask you to go ahead and see, is there information you can provide us, since I assume the fire marshal is not on the line, either you or Mr. Salazar can tell us about fire protection equipment and pump houses and what typically is or is not required.
This is Jay Salazar, the building official for the city of Vacaville. Typically, on any type of industrial park development like the one we're viewing tonight, the applicant automatically includes a pump house, which is part of an EFSR sprinkler system. It's a higher, it allows the developer or the owner of the property to have a number of options to choose from in terms of the types of tenants that might want to move into that facility. So consequently, it's the EFSR system or the proposal here isn't really related to a specific tenant or type of use. It's really there as an economic incentive for the property owner to be able to attract different types of uses that might need the EFSR system.
Thank you, Mr. Salazar. I'm going to see, I see Ms. Bowman has a hand raised, so go ahead, applicant representative.
Sure. Sorry about that. I raised my hand again when it sounded like the public comment was initially directed toward me. So I apologize for that. But I do want to just thank the commission for hearing this project tonight, and thank you for your consideration.
and Ms. Stout, I don't think you've used your 3 minutes, so if you have another question or comment, please proceed.
Thank you. So I don't think that my question was quite answered. So it just seems to me, and I'm just a layperson, but that if you're putting in a pump house, that your potential for a pretty good sized fire must be pretty high. What types of businesses would go in there that would require a pump house? What types of potentially highly flammable businesses could go in there? And I may be completely off base. I don't know. Thank you.
And Mr. Sutler, I'll ask you again, and I know we have some businesses in town that do have pump houses that have high stack storage. Is this something that is fairly typical of a requirement or only targeted a more narrow range of businesses?
No, it's this is Jay Salazar, the building official for the city of Vacaville. Yeah, it's actually a very typical development strategy by almost all developers who build large warehouse complexes like this. And it really, the types of uses that could go in there are really related to the building code, which would allow any type of business or use. So hazardous occupancy could go in there, as well as a factory occupancy, as well as those types of occupancies that are defined in the building code. The pump house, again, doesn't mean that there's going to be something more hazardous in the building. It simply means that the developer or the property owner is wanting to have a number of options to be able to attract tenants into their space. But those tenants are not going to be necessarily more hazardous than any other tenant that would go into any other building within the city of Vacaville.
So within the realm then of what we deal with as the Planning Commission, we look generically at warehouse uses, and then when it comes in for a specific use, that you as the building official would look at that use, make sure that what's approved has adequate fire protection, and if it did not, require some sort of retrofit for the internal to make sure that that was covered. But that's building official, not Planning Commission action. Did I get that correct?
Yes, that's Honorable Chairperson. That is absolutely correct. The issues of hazardous occupancies and types are identified at the building permit stage, the ministerial process that occurs in the city. And not only does the building department look at the uses that come in for building permits, we partner with the fire department. They also review the same building permits, and we coordinate our actions together to ensure that the California building standards are met. And the California building standards are the standards that are always applied to all occupancies and businesses and development that occur in California.
Thanks. I want to make sure that while we focus on things that the Planning Commission has jurisdiction on, that the public's questions are also addressed as best we can. I'm looking at the attendee list to see if anyone else has their hand raised, and I don't see that. Madam Secretary, is there anyone on the phone that does not show on the attendee list that is seeking to participate right now?
No, there is not.
Okay, then since it appears there's no more public comment, I'm going to go ahead and close the public hearing. My very quick comment on this before I ask for a motion is that I like the sort of basic jobs that this provides, and I think in the industrial park, I'd rather have industrial than commercial uses, and so I think this is a change that I'm happy to see go forward, and I think my fellow commissioners have pretty well echoed that sort of thought with their comments about jobs and such previously. Do we have any other questions before we proceed? And if not, I see Commissioner Alan Johnson has raised his hand. Commissioner Alan Johnson?
I was going to make the motion, sorry.
Okay, then go ahead and make a motion.
I was just going to say move approval. Is that good enough?
Move approval of the project as shown with the recommendation in the staff report and on screen. And I see Vice Chair Aldrich, or no longer Vice Chair. I see Commissioner Aldrich has raised her hand. Is that second?
Yes, it is a second.
So we have a motion to approve the project and a second, and I will ask the recording secretary to call the roll.
Commissioners Aldrich,
Yes.
Beaumont,
Yes.
Alan Johnson,
Aye.
Brett Johnson,
Yes.
Lightfoot,
Aye.
Vice Chair Fortney,
Yes.
Chair McCauley.
Yes. Project passes 7-0. Mr. Baderi, the disposition of the project.
This project is a recommendation to the City Council. The general plan amendment causes the project to go to the City Council for a final decision. I don't know if we have a specific schedule, tentative schedule planned at this date. Maybe Saul can help me with that, but it'll be noticed for a future City Council meeting.
And at some future planning commission meeting, you will tell us what the council's actions were. Thank you. That was the only public hearing. We now have several business items under 8. 8A is the Downtown Specific Plan Outdoor Dining Program with a presentation by Senior Planner Hayes. I see a presentation up on the screen. I don't hear any speaking.
Can you hear me now?
We can hear you now.
Oh, I do apologize. I gave you a great intro. So thank you, Chairman, members of the Commission. My name is Tyra Hayes. For those on the phone, I am the project manager on the Downtown Specific Plan. Tonight's item, which is on the City of Vacaville's outdoor dining program, is related to the Downtown Specific Plan as it pertains to restaurants located downtown. But as you're about to hear from our Economic Development Manager, Tim Patton, the program we're about to share with the Planning Commission extends beyond the downtown and is applicable to the entirety of the city. So to give you a presentation about the city's program, I have Tim Patton. He will do the presentation, and we also have City Planner Bavand on the phone to answer additional questions and to educate the Planning Commission in terms of how the program is currently being administered and amended as necessary to meet the needs of our merchants. So with that, I give you Mr. Patton.
Thank you, Tyra. Good evening, Chairperson, Planning Commission. I'm Tim Patton, the Economic Development Manager for the City of Vacaville. I believe this is the first opportunity that I've had to talk to you guys and present to the Planning Commission. I think this is an exciting project that I'm going to discuss this evening. It's our outdoor dining program, or as we now call it, Vacaville Al Fresco. Really, the goal of the program is to provide social distancing with our food establishments, our restaurants, while promoting opportunities for restaurants to do business, while maintaining the standards that the state has provided both counties and cities, as well as the health issues that we're facing today in 2020 with COVID-19. And I just want to say that the overall theme of the program of Vacaville Al Fresco is flexibility. We want this program to be as flexible as possible. These are actually uncharted waters for not only the city, but restaurateurs and other businesses in terms of having to do business in a completely different way. So the city's really trying to be as flexible as possible to allow for businesses to do kind of things that aren't really conventional or maybe are more unconventional given past practices. So if we can go to the next slide, that'd be great. So this is a program that's, virtually every California city has an outdoor dining program. Every city is certainly in the Bay Area has implemented some sort of program, whether it's for restaurants, other retail sectors, personal service industry, things of that nature. So the actual Vacaville Al Fresco program is kind of twofold. So on June 9th, staff received City Council approval for outdoor dining on just sidewalks and predominantly in the downtown area. So Main Street, Cernan Street, Parker Street, Dobbins, pretty much the core of downtown and what would be considered the geography of the downtown Vacaville Business Improvement District. That was on June 9th, and we received council approval that evening. And then 2 weeks later, we took another staff report back to City Council seeking for approval of a more comprehensive citywide program that would allow for outdoor dining, not only on public right-of-way, on sidewalks in downtown Vacaville, but really citywide. And that also included the ability for restaurants to set up outdoor dining on private parking lots. Now, with private parking lots, the city doesn't have a direct say on approval, but we have asked that the applicants from these at these restaurants get property owner approval as part of the application process, which I'll talk about in a minute. So it's kind of twofold. So we have the kind of the public right-of-way component of the program, and then the private parking lots. With outreach efforts, we have set up a Vacaville Alfresco webpage. The city has worked very closely with the downtown Vacaville Business Improvement District and the Chamber of Commerce in promoting the program to get the application out to as many restaurants as possible. We have done several email blasts to get the application out to the restaurants and the terms and conditions associated with the application, which we have 2 exhibits as part of the application process. So every restaurateur that fills out the application will also get a set of the terms and conditions, Exhibit A and Exhibit B, which is a 4-page document kind of outlining what and what not, or what isn't permissible as part of the program. The overall duration of the program is going to last until the end of the year. December 31st, 2020 is the projected end date of the program. City Council has the right to extend the program if needed into the following year. We're just kind of wait and see how things go with this program. As I mentioned, these are kind of uncharted waters. If we need to extend it past the end of the year, we will certainly do that, because we want to be as accommodating as possible to businesses during these trying times. Our city manager on June 24th signed an emergency order that implemented the outdoor dining program for both on-street parking and off-street parking and private parking lots. Our city manager is the director of emergency services, and acting in that role, he executed the emergency order for the program. The fiscal impact of the program, it's not terribly expensive. We have a budget of about $8,000 for the program, and the vast majority of that money will go towards putting up K-rail and other barricades. And we're working closely with our Public Works Department to get those activities done. So it's a relatively small budget for a project that's going to have, I think, a huge impact on the success of our restaurants. Go to the next slide, please, Albert. So here's an example of the application. It's pretty straightforward. We have a relatively quick turnaround on the applications. And oftentimes, planning staff and payment can turn this around pretty much on the spot. So for applicants who are going to be on-street parking, which, for instance, La Brigada in downtown has 4 spaces that are kind of cordoned off for their outdoor seating area. They have to, fill out this application, but also provide or fill out an insurance form and provide a certificate of liability insurance since they are on city property. We're trying to make this, as I mentioned, as straightforward as possible. If you're on private property, all you need to do basically is fill out this application. Takes no more than 5 minutes. Next slide, Albert. So some of the restaurants that we've actually already approved, you'll see that the majority of them are on private property, but we do have some clear examples of restaurants on public property. So La Brigada, they're the only one so far that has K-rail around on-street parking spaces, but Merchant in Maine and Heritage House, also in downtown, have utilized public property. And then as far as private property, Hank and Hazel's, Clay Oven, Black Bear Diner, Black Oak Restaurants, and BJ's have all set up some form of outdoor seating on private property. And again, they had to get permission of the property owner. And so we're working closely with some of our larger property owners, for instance, the property owners and property managers of the Nut Tree Complex and the premium outlets to ensure that there's a smoother rollout of this process. I think that's it for my part. So I'm going to turn it over to, I believe, Payman to wrap up the presentation.
Thanks. Tim actually went over my slides, so I don't have anything new to present. As Tim mentioned, we've had a number of inquiries on this, and those that you see on the screen are the ones that have submitted applications. I think if you walk around downtown or around the city, you'll see other restaurants that have outdoor dining. Those may be ones that have not actually submitted an application and filled out the forms to have that be officially approved. So not all the outdoor dining areas in the city have actually gone through this approval process that Tim mentioned. So if you have friends that have restaurants, please let them know to go to the city's website. It's right on the front page, and fill out the application form. Tim's right. The application doesn't take very long to fill out. What we've had some issues with is getting the insurance forms correctly processed and sent over to us. But you know, not going to repeat a lot of things Tim said. We are trying to be as flexible as we can, and we're hoping that once we all get through the pandemic we're dealing with, that this would be something that is really a mainstay in downtown and in other places in the city. The private property projects that you see that have obtained those permits are all over the city. Black Bear Diner, Black Oak Restaurant, Clay Oven, BJ's. This is something that I think for a long time restaurants wanted to do. Unfortunately, this pandemic has given them a reason to actually do it now. But we're hopeful that it stays beyond the situation that we're in now. And in terms of what Tyra's work on that she'll go through with the downtown specific plan, I think we are going to try to identify some of these in there. And what we have done so far, we've sort of looked at this process and seen what's working and what's not working, what's been customer friendly and what has been customer friendly. The initial iteration of the plan required a site plan, and what we were finding is, for the average person, average business owner, they're not really familiar with the site plan, especially in an area like downtown where you're just on the street. So we decided to take another look at this, and we updated it to basically let folks know, look, Exhibit A and Exhibit B, these are your conditions of approval. You just have to comply with those. We don't need to see a site plan. That's going to take more time for you to prepare. But this is something new, like Tim mentioned. So we are working with our business owners, working with different departments in the city and City Hall to sort of continuously look at this to make sure that we're staying ahead of problems that we're seeing or responding to requests that we're getting from specific business owners. So hopefully, if you haven't already, you all get a chance to go out there and definitely give your business to those that are providing these outdoor spaces. So that's all I have. I'm happy to answer any questions.
All right, thanks, Mr. Pavon. Do we have any of the commissioners with questions for any of our staff members who are here?
Yes, this is Brett Johnson.
Go ahead, Commissioner Johnson.
Quick question. For those properties that are going to utilize a public property similar to La Borgata and the parking stalls that they've used, it was mentioned that the city requires a certificate of insurance as part of that application. Is it also required with part of the certificate of insurance to name the city as additionally insured in that policy?
Yes.
Okay. That's all. That's the only question I had. Thanks.
Any other commissioners with questions at this point before I go and see if the public wants to participate? I see Commissioner Alan Johnson with his hand raised.
Yes, just real quick. I think this is a great program, and I'd like to see it continue well beyond this year. I know we've long talked on the commission about things that would make the downtown more vibrant and economically viable. And I think this is one of the things that we've kind of envisioned. And I see Brooks on on the call as well, so I'd like to hear her comment on that if that's what she's going to talk about. But I would like to see this continue on. I think it's a great strategy for a vibrant downtown.
Great, thanks, Commissioner Johnson. That's probably as good a transition as any to opening this up for comments from the public. And I do see one member of the public, Brooke Fox, has their hand raised. So go ahead, Ms. Fox.
Hello, good evening, commissioners. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, wonderful. Yes, this is a very exciting program for several reasons for downtown. Many of you who have driven through or walked through downtown recently have seen the increased street vitality simply by having people eating outside has really brought a new energy to downtown. So very excited about that, and more and more restaurants are coming around and signing up, especially as the weeks go on. So I think we'll bring a few more on board as we go. One thing I did want to mention is we have heard from the public about the possibility of street closures as part of this endeavor. And so we are working hard to balance. I'm working hard with Tim and Tyra to balance the idea of creating a communal space via a street closure if warranted, to provide for some overflow space for the restaurants so that they can achieve what their greatest capacity through this. But so far, the desire and the sort of layout, the types of restaurants on certain blocks haven't really warranted that type of program movement, so to speak. So it hasn't really warranted a closure yet. But as we go on, we're working to identify areas that we might close in a potential program later. So that is one thing. And as it relates to the downtown specific plan, obviously Parklet's a big part of that plan, but also if you recall, one piece of that plan is to create almost a pedestrian dining plaza on Merchant Street, on the little block of Merchant Street behind Ray Cycle. So that one block setting there. So I feel as though if we do endeavor down that road, that it would be a really nice dovetail into the downtown specific plan and the 5-year and 10-year outlook for downtown. So very excited to see this get off the ground.
Great. I see Commissioner Aldrich has a question. Go ahead.
Brooke, this is Jan Aldrich. Are most of these restaurants pet friendly?
Yes, if you do sit outside, it is generally a pet friendly experience.
Thank you.
Do we have any other commissioners that have questions for Ms. Fox? Can we click over to the panelist list, please? Don't see any hands raised. Are there any other members of the public who have questions or comments they'd like to present at this time? Seeing none, I'll go ahead and close the public input portion of this. This isn't an action item, so unless there's closing comments from any members of the commission, and I don't see any hands raised, thank you for the presentation, and delighted to see the out-of-doors dining, and also delighted to see staff working with the merchants to say, yeah, if this isn't working quite in the process that we like, let's go talk with them and find something that does work for everybody. So I think that's a good move on the part of our staff. Our second item, 8B, is Planning Commission meeting time. We can take an action on this if we need, which would be to change the time, or we can take an action to leave it as it is. So at the end of it, I will go ahead and ask for an action on the part of the commission. I know one commissioner had approached me saying, can we meet earlier? I've had others say, the later time is great, and probably the desires that are found on the commission will reflect the community as well. People that are raising families, people that work in town, people that work out of town, people that are retired. I don't have a strong view either way on this, so I'm just going to see if I can manage the discussion for those who want to speak up either in favor of changing to an earlier time or to speak up in favor of maintaining the time that we have right now. And at this point, I'll ask Anybody on the commission who wishes to speak, to raise their hand, and Commissioner Beaumont has his hand up first.
Well, this is Commissioner Beaumont. I seem to be the one that raised it first, and so I'll go off first. I just think it's time to get back in sync with the city council at 6 p.m. They've been meeting at 6 p.m. for as long as I can remember. The public has no problem with being there for their meetings if there's something they want to show up for. I think the support staff that supports us as the Planning Commission would really appreciate getting home earlier than later because they have to come to work the next morning. And also, most of the planning commissioners that do work would appreciate getting home earlier rather than later. So I just look at those things and I think that it's better to go back to 6 o'clock and get home a little earlier. And I think it's a beneficial thing. That's my opinion.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Beaumont. Commissioner Brett Johnson.
Yes, I'd like to echo Commissioner Beaumont's sentiments and vie for the earlier start time. Thanks.
Okay. Commissioner Aldrich has her physical hand raised, so go ahead, Jen.
I work evenings, and I'm having to give up a session of tutoring. My choice, of course, to be on the Planning Commission. However, I would prefer not to have to give up my 4 o'clock session. I work in Fairfield. I don't get off work until 5:30, and to be here at 6 o'clock I would probably never be on time for a meeting, but if that's okay, I can handle it. But for me, it's tough because I work until 5:30 in Fairfield.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Alan Johnson, your hand's up.
Yeah, just a short comment. One of the things that I've kind of been pushing for since I got on the commission was for more community involvement. And I'm just wondering if the 6 o'clock time wouldn't encourage people to come more so than the later time. But I don't have a super strong feeling either way, so I'm open to listening to my other commissioners.
Okay. Other commissioners who wish to speak? And Commissioner Alan Johnson, one of the things that I figure is whatever works well for the commission, because of how well we probably represent community, work in town and out of town, retired or not, have kids that are raising, don't, that what's good for us probably reflects what's good for the community. And so if most of the commission members find that meeting earlier works for them, I would guess that members of the community find the same thing, that if most of us find it's good to meet early, that the members of the community will find it easier to participate if we meet early. Commissioner Fortney, Vice Chair Fortney.
Yeah, I think you're spot on there. So I would support the 6 p.m. start time.
Okay. Since this is an action item, I'm going to see if there's any members of the public, before I come back to Commissioner Beaumont, I'm going to see if any members of the public wish to chime in on this. And I don't see any hands up, so I'll come back to Commissioner Beaumont. You have something else you wanted to add? Commissioner Beaumont, was there something else you wish to say? Okay, you're off mute.
Can you hear me
Commissioner
now?
Beaumont, are you still trying to speak?
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Okay, we can hear you now.
Great. I'd just like to make a motion whenever we're done with comments.
Okay. One thing I will ask before we get into the time of making a motion is, as if I assume that we're going to move towards having a 6 o'clock meeting time, specify when we would make that effective. Would that be with our next meeting or at some other milestone so that we give staff clear direction? And I'm going to turn to the city attorney right now and ask, just to make sure we're doing the process right, other than making a simple motion and taking action, is there anything else we need to do? Do we need to take action on this at 2 consecutive meetings? Does the council need to approve it, or is it simply our action tonight can make any change we so desire?
So as Director Baderi put into the staff report, it is at the Planning Commission's discretion to set the time of the meeting. What the motion would be to change the time and to make changes to the Planning Commission's rules for conducting business that would reflect the meeting time change, because currently in section 601 of the rules says that the meeting's scheduled for 7, so we would just want those rules to accurately reflect the Planning Commission's change.
Okay, so it is strictly up to us. Commissioner Aldrich has her hand up again.
Yeah, I think I will be able to adjust my schedule without any problem to go with the flow. I think I could probably adjust my students' time to be able to leave earlier and make the meeting, so not a problem for me.
So I think the sense of the commission, as I've heard it, is that beginning with our August 2020 meeting to establish a meeting time of 6 p.m. for that and all future planning commission meetings, and to direct staff to update all appropriate documents, including the planning commission rules and other items to reflect that change of time. Commissioner Beaumont, is that kind of what you were thinking?
Yeah, I was just going to suggest that we change the Planning Commission rules and meeting time to 6 p.m. starting with the August 2020 meeting.
No surprise, you're a little more succinct than me. Do we have a second for that motion?
I'll second.
Okay, Commissioner Aldrich has seconded, so motion by Commissioner Beaumont, second by Commissioner Aldrich. First, I'll ask the secretary, were you able to properly record the motion?
Yes.
Are there any commissioners that have questions on the motion? Seeing no hands up, I will ask the secretary to call the roll.
Commissioner Aldrich?
Yes.
Beaumont?
Yes.
Alan Johnson?
Aye.
Brett Johnson?
Yes.
Lightfoot?
Aye.
Vice Chair Fortney?
Yes.
Chair McCauley?
Aye. Passes unanimously. And I believe that we've already had stated clear what the disposition is. So when we meet in a month, we'll be meeting at 6 o'clock rather than at 7. Thank you all for that. Next is item number 9, status reports on development and major projects, starting with current planning.
Okay, and I think Albert is going to be providing the current planning report.
Good evening, Chair and members of the Planning Commission. This is Albert Enault in the current Planning Division, here to give you an update on the activity in June of this year. In June, we received a few applications, starting with the Villages at Vannon Meadows Development Agreement Amendment. We received a request to change that, and the amendment includes a change to 4 items in that development agreement for Vannon Meadows. As you may remember, Vannon Meadows is located between Nut Tree Road and Leisuretown Road, south of Cogburn. And so what the applicant's looking at doing is extending the development agreement from 10 years to 20 years. They also want to exempt the project from obtaining allocations underneath the city's planned growth ordinance. They'd like to change the community facility district annexation requirement from CFD 11 to CFD 12, and they'd like to eliminate a requirement to pay a community benefit contribution for each building permit. So that was one of the big applications that we received during June that will need to go before the Planning Commission and then City Council at some future date. We also received a design and review request for a new single-family custom home at 707 Hillview Crest. It's a 1,900 square foot house. We received also another design review request for a new soccer field in Centennial Park. It's located at 501 Browns Valley Parkway. It includes irrigation and perimeter landscaping, but at this time they're not proposing any parking. We also received a smaller project, the Regency Park Plaza. They looked at changing some signage requirements in their planned sign program. That's for the development over at 615 through 653 Elmira Road. In June, there were some projects that were approved, including the Midway Commerce Center. That was approved by the Acting Director of Community Development. It includes a tentative parcel map and design review request to construct up to 5 warehouse buildings in phases on approximately 90 acres of land. And that's located on the east side of Eubanks Drive, on the west side of Eubanks Drive, south of Midway Road. It'll include accessory office spaces and the warehouses. It'll consist of approximately 1.68 million square feet of warehousing. The site plan includes the building footprints with driveways on Eubanks Drive, a little over 1,000 parking spaces. Then the parcel map request would create, it looks like 4 parcels out of that 90-acre lot. We also received a smaller application for somebody to do a patio cover in their backyard. And then we also approved the Sonoma Springs Brewing temporary use permit, the temporary commercial use permit to operate a food truck as part of the Sonoma Springs Brewing Company restaurant located at 300 Main Street. During June, we were still busy with home-based businesses. We received 21 applications and approved 20 home-based businesses. We were really busy with plan checks, still getting those done. We reviewed 79 building permit applications, primarily around the Farmstead House Plans development, Lagoon Valley, their self-storage facility that was approved by the Planning Commission some time ago. And then also an assortment of plot plans and house plans and the Piedmont, which is Vanden Meadows area, and then also Preston and Sheffield house plans and Brighton Landing. Overall, in June, we helped out 115 development-related inquiries and helped with 1 zoning complaint. That is it for current planning. I'm here to answer any questions.
Albert, this is Doug Beaumont. Albert, do you hear me?
Yep, I can hear you.
Yeah, are the Farmstead home plans, are they going to come before the Planning Commission, or do they just go and get approved?
So those houses were approved by the Director of Community Development. Within our code, there is a provision that allows house plans like that to be able to be reviewed and approved via staff level review if they comply with the city's design requirements for new single-family development. So those have already been approved.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Albert? Seeing none, then it looks like advanced planning is Mr. Baderi. Fred, go ahead.
Thank you. For advanced planning, several things going on. You heard discussion of part of the downtown specific plan that really represents a significant amount of work that the division is doing. They're working on also the parking study, which you received a review of at your last meeting and is not in its final form yet. So a lot of work going on with the downtown plan. And I would say not just by advanced planning, but you saw with the report tonight on outdoor dining that it's involving a lot of work, a lot of coordination and teaming up with different departments and different divisions within the community development department to try and come up with a really good plan. We're also working on the Green Tree project still. We've received funding from the developer for a number of the infrastructure analyses that would have to go in to evaluating land use potential on the site. And those studies are underway or will be underway shortly. A lot of work was done over this last month on an item reviewed by the City Council last week, and that was a decision on whether to place a cannabis tax on the November ballot. Not specifically a land use action, but would potentially result in future items related to land use. And so Christina in the division spent a lot of time working on the report that went to council along with the city attorney's office on how to place an item on the ballot. A couple of staff members, Saul Uribe, who you heard from earlier, and Maya Amchai in the Advanced Planning Division, prepared a grant application to submit an urban greening grant proposal to the state for an enhancement of the Rocky Hill Trail corridor. So if you're familiar with that trail corridor, there's a very nice trail there. There are a number of things that the community has voiced an interest in seeing, such as some landscaping and other trail and recreational improvements. Maya and Saul worked on a grant application with the city's grant consultant and prepared that and got that submitted actually last week to the state. So we're hoping that will go forward. And then finally, some additional work has been continuing on the Trackit integration with the city's GIS system. So this is the permit tracking system And the integration with GIS will be especially helpful to the building division staff who are out in the field planning inspections at different locations. And so the advanced planning staff have been working on that as well. That's the summary for now.
Fred, I seem to recall discussions of GIS and permit integration 20 years ago. I hope it actually moves forward.
Yeah, good point. And yes, we agree with that. I think it is, and I think we're getting very close to having the upgrade prepared.
Good to hear. Mr. Salazar, building division update.
Thank you, Honorable Chairperson and Honorable Commissioners. Thought I would give you a little something to give you a sense of what the building division does with respect to all the things that the Planning Commission works on at one point or another. So I'm going to give you, since it's the end of the fiscal year, I thought you'd be interested in looking at a couple of items about what the building division does throughout the year, and this will just really be brief. Next slide, please. So here's a graph showing this fiscal year's inspections, total inspections made, as well as last fiscal year's in comparison. And so this fiscal year, the building division performed 15,000 inspections. In June, about 1,375 inspections were completed. That was the last month of the fiscal year. And all those 15,000 inspections were covered by 3 inspectors. So that represents about 57 inspections a day, which rounds out to about a little under 20 inspections per inspector. Those 3 inspectors are Tim Howlett, Fabi Batchsella, Greg O'Kander. And so they really are doing quite a great job, and I want you to know that they're working very hard on a regular basis. And next slide, please. Then the other 3 members of the building division are the permit staff who administer and issue permits. Those permits, the last fiscal year, we issued 4,700 permits. In June, there were about 401 permits. And the 3 permitting staff that take care of all those permits, as well as help in scheduling inspections, filing, answering questions, and assisting the planners. Those 3 people are Kristen Vitello, who's the building services coordinator. She generally works on subdivisions and single-family dwelling units and makes sure that conditions of approval have been are being addressed, or any issues associated with development agreements associated with a subdivision approval are being addressed prior to issuing permits for those single-family dwelling units. The other 2 permit techs are Debbie Fowler and Rebecca Diaz, and they handle almost all the over-the-counter phone inquiries and permit processing for everything other than major buildings and new single-family dwelling units. Next slide, please. So this is something that Kristen works on diligently. Kristen Vitello, I mentioned earlier, she handles all the issuance of single-family dwelling unit permits associated with all the subdivisions in Vacaville. She also, as part of her regular routine, will assign addresses or building numbers. And so you can imagine that can be a little challenging when you're dealing with a large subdivision. So in the 2019-2020 fiscal year, which is the one that just ended, we issued a total of 406 single-family dwelling unit permits. In June, we issued 37 of that 406. Compared that to last year, however, we issued 30 in June, but for the entire fiscal year of last year, 2018-2019, we issued 269. So fortunately, we've seen a dramatic increase in single-family dwelling units. Next slide, please. one item that I thought you might be interested in hearing about, because it deals with your action on your energy and conservation action strategy found in the general plan and the general plan EIR. And that is a solar requirement. And as you guys, some of you might well know that beginning this year, the state of California was requiring solar panels to be installed on all new permit applications submitted this year for single-family dwelling units, new single-family dwelling units. And it's an interesting public policy approach. You won't find any place in the energy code that says solar panels have to be installed. What the Energy Commission staff did in the building standards was they created a baseline dwelling unit that had solar panels installed on it, and said that any new dwelling unit built in California has to use equal or less energy than the baseline dwelling unit. And so the easiest way for a designer to meet that requirement is to just automatically include photovoltaic solar panels on the roof of a new single-family dwelling unit. Very creative way to implement a public policy standard, because it gives lots of options to the builder. Now, one thing that's related to the ECAS, or the Energy and Conservation Action Strategy, is solar panels will actually help us reduce CO2 emissions. So on average, as you'll see on this slide at the very bottom, on average about 4,800 pounds of CO2 emissions are saved for each house that has solar on it, whether it be a new house or whether it be an existing permit that we've issued. And that translates into about that translates into about 2.2 metric tons. And so if you go back to the ECAS standards and the goals that Tyra has worked on diligently over a number of years, you'll find that all the goals are set in metric tons. So it's not very many metric tons we get per house, but every little bit can help. And that's just part of the building permit process. Next slide, please. So here's an example of building permit unrelated to new houses where we've issued solar permits. And so this is the last 2 fiscal years, again, compared side by side. The solar permits are in the dark solid bars for this fiscal year, which is just ended, 2019 to 2020. And the previous year are in the dashed lines. And as you can see, in this year, in January, February, March, April, May, and June of this year, we actually issued fewer photovoltaic solar permits to contractors than we did the previous year. And one reason for that is that the federal tax incentives went away. So prior to 2020, there was a tax credit given if you installed solar panels, and that tax credit got reduced in 2019. So subsequently, as we expected to see, we saw a slight dip in the number of solar permits that we issued. And that really concludes my presentation. Do you have any questions or comments?
Commissioners, any questions for Mr. Salazar? I don't see anybody raising their hand with question for Mr. Salazar. Thank you for the three of you for your reports. Item number 10 is the director's report. Go ahead for both A and B, Mr. Baderi.
Thank you. So with regard to City Council actions pertaining to Planning Commission items, at their last meeting, the City Council took a few actions that will affect items that may come before the Planning Commission at a future date. The Commission, as I mentioned earlier, or rather the Council, as I mentioned earlier, did decide to place on the November ballot a cannabis tax And this doesn't really result in any land use issues, but it could in the future result in changes to the city's regulations for cannabis uses. The City Council took additional action on directing staff to work more on the outdoor dining and outdoor use item that you heard a description of earlier this evening, and in particular affecting the Commission's future schedule. As Tyra and Payman and Tim all mentioned, this is an issue that is something we do want to look at very carefully as we come forward with the downtown specific plan, looking at ways to provide opportunities and options for businesses to make use of outdoor space and enliven the downtown, as Brooke Fox mentioned. And then finally, the council did approve a negotiating rights agreement between the city and the Boys and Girls Club to discuss the possibility of doing a project on property on Brown Street owned by the city, and investigating the feasibility of doing a project for the Boys and Girls Club on that site. And if that were to go forward, that would likely be an action that would come before the Planning Commission if it met the criteria for public review by the Commission. And then I'll go to item B, tentative. Well, any questions on any of those items that I can answer for you?
Don't see anybody with their hand raised, so proceed.
Okay, and then tentative schedule for future Planning Commission items. Your next meeting in August, which will be at 6 p.m. We do expect to have the downtown specific plan parking study in its public review form by then and presented to you. So the Planning Commission at your last meeting, you asked us to return to show you the final version of the report with its recommendations and analysis of parking issues in the downtown. And so we do expect to receive it shortly, and we would expect to have that on your agenda for the August meeting. And that would be a review of the findings, any suggestions that the Commission might have for parking strategies necessary in the downtown specific plan effort. We also are hoping that by the middle of August, we are able to publish the full draft revised development code. And if that were the case, we'd be hoping to deliver copies to the Commission next month in August, and potentially providing you with an introductory presentation on the contents of the draft code to go back over some of the things that you've all reviewed over the course of many meetings over the last year. So that is our hope on that one. Still a lot to do to finish it up in the next month, but we're hoping those two items are before you next month.
Any questions or comments for Mr. Baderi on item number 10? Don't see any, then we'll go to 11, which is commissioner comments. Rather than having Nancy read the roll, I'll just ask you to raise your hand if there's any comments you wish to make at this point. And I don't see any.
This is Doug Beaumont.
Mr. Beaumont, go ahead.
Yeah, I'd just like to thank Jan for supporting that change in time, even though it means changing her schedule for that one evening a month. And I appreciate that very much.
Not a problem. Thank you for that.
Any other commission comments? Then we'll move on to item number 12, which is adjournment. I will see you all in just slightly less than a month now, since we've knocked 1 hour off the meeting time. I hope you all have a good evening. I hope you all stay away from the COVID bug, and we will talk to you in a month. Vacaville, good night.